All right, so we are live. Thanks for joining. Um, I have a scripture I wanted to share. It's actually from the book of Alma again, uh, a few chapters earlier than what I shared last week. Um, so one of my favorite verses actually is Alma 37:37, where it says, "Counsel with the Lord in all thy doings, and he will direct thee for good. Yea, when thou liest down at night, lie down unto the Lord, that he may watch over you in your sleep. And when thou risest in the morning, let thy heart be full of thanks unto God. And if you do these things, you shall be lifted up at the last day." And I guess what is on my mind with that is keeping the Lord involved in every single part of our lives. He knows it, and he's concerned about it, and he's there to help us out. And then further down, he teaches Helaman about the Liahona, or the director that led Lehi's family in the wilderness. It says it worked according to their faith in God. And then the closing verses of the chapter teach us of another way to counsel with the Lord, and I also love these verses. He says, "Are these things not without a shadow? For as our fathers were slothful to give heed to this, not prosper, even so it is with the things which are spiritual. For behold, it is as easy to give heed to the word of Christ, which will point to great bliss, as it was for this compass, which would point them unto them a straight course to the promised land. And now I say, is there not a type in this thing? As this director did bring our fathers by following its course to the promised land, shall the words of Christ, if we follow their course, beyond this sorrow into far better land of promise." And, so just connecting those two, we think of counseling with the Lord, we think of prayer, or at least I do.
Yeah.
It's fine over. We think of the Word of God. I think those are our two lifelines to Father, and involving him in every part of our lives. I know that we have many Liahonas. We have the scriptures, we have the words of the living prophets that give us counsel. We have one another. We have family members, the Holy Ghost. So many Liahonas or directors to help us in our lives. So I know that's true. I wanted to share those verses with you. All right. Well, how are things going?
They're going fine.
Great. Keeping nice and busy?
Yeah.
Is there any questions about anything?
No, I think we're plugging right along in our group. We've got a large group, so.
Yeah, it's funny how smaller groups and bigger groups and in between. Yeah. Try to keep them small enough that they're manageable, but sometimes they get on that bigger side. So
we have 7 in our group.
I thought you were the 7 group. So.
Yeah, we're group 7 and there's 7 of us.
Yeah, that's right. Cool. Well, like I said, I shot out an email last night. I am working on those doohickey papers. I do like to give those an in-depth read so I can give you a feedback. And
yeah.
To get those done by Saturday night, no later than Monday morning. I typically do stuff on Sundays, so
yeah.
Keep at that. So, but I know you're all anxious to, you turn in the work and you want the grade, so I am working on it.
Yeah.
Groups. So be a thing, but it's always good. It's interesting, new perspective come through, and every group. Great. And then
what
what I'll do is
up, Brother Stanley.
Oh, am I?
Yeah. It's like your stream is slow.
Oh, really? Okay. That could be. I need to talk to my internet company. All right. Well, hopefully it catches up here. Heather, the paper was tough.
Just a little bit.
The toughest part.
And when you got so many people and you're trying to put all the little details together, and they ought to sound pretty odd sometimes with everybody's way of writing. Makes such a variety.
Yeah, I've seen it done. Yeah. So that's part. Honestly, I think it's part of how this class is designed, organized, and you probably hear that a lot with classes. But yeah, it's challenging, and I've seen groups do it in different ways. Some groups will have like one compiler. Other groups will have sections assigned out, and
yeah,
you just give it some good editing that can help with that. Google Docs can help with that as well. If you've not used that before, or something like Google Docs where you can all work on the same document.
Yeah, that's what we're using.
And comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, it's not the only way to do it, but any of the group papers I did in my college work or my graduate work,
yeah,
we used that. So it's easy to collaborate.
We kind of assigned sections. There's about 4 of us that are really active in the group and communicate a lot. So we just kind of assigned sections and told the others that weren't there the last time we talked, help so-and-so with this or help so-and-so with that, and just kind of gave them something to work on too. So it worked out, and then we had one person put it all together, and we'll probably switch it up as to who goes through and edits it for this next time. So we just take turns.
Perfect. And then, from my perspective, just to all of you, make sure that you're part of that group effort. I know of the struggles with group work, but really just it's in your best interest to stay involved. There's always those that are heavily involved, and there's some that kind of like the sidelines. And so make sure you're not on the sidelines. There's actually some peer evaluation that happens after each paper. And so, that comes through as well.
Right.
Good deal. Well, interesting topic this week as far as talent management or recruiting or talent development, kind of that whole operation of what we do with people, how we recruit them.
Yeah.
Anything jump out to you? Anything that was maybe a new idea or reinforcement of something?
Oh, well, I know that on the Gowan thing, it was like I was kind of in something similar. We had quite a few candidates for it, but they didn't have us talk with each separate person. They put them into groups of, it happened to be for an EA position within a school district. So for the elementary school, so they took all the principals from the different elementary schools and put them in groups of like 3, and each of them had a set of questions, and they chose from those questions. And so you just moved from table to table within one room. There was like 3 or 4 candidates being interviewed at a time.
Oh, okay.
And it took them a few times to do it, but with so many candidates, it's easier that way. And then they all have the same questions, the same, corresponding questions that they can put together to help them decide. So it's like, that sounded like what they should have done instead of their Super Saturday, which can be exhausting for a person. Yeah. And the interviewers, you're sitting in one spot doing so many people, try and clear your head. But ours was trying to figure out what the difference was between recruiting and hiring. It's like, well, what is it? So I was looking around, and I had on difference.com, I liked how they said that recruitment is the process of searching the potential candidates with right skills and qualifications for employment and encouraging them to apply for jobs in the organization, whereas hiring is the process of offering the employment opportunity for a selected employee for an agreed fee.
Ah, interesting.
So that kind of, for me, helped to clarify it a little bit.
Okay, so recruiting is more of the attraction element, and the hiring is the
and integrating too, right?
Oh yeah, integrating, yeah. Yeah, and Heather, you mentioned a panel as well. Yeah, I think you're right. So I think in both those thoughts, what you shared, Cindy, and what you mentioned with the panel, Heather, it's important to have consistency, some kind of framework. Because if you don't, then how do you make a decision if you're interviewing, 5 people, or in SG Cohen's case, you're interviewing 20, 30 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that integrating part is huge. In the case, recruiting in good times and bad. We read that one.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the plug and play.
No.
Plug in, you're ready to go.
Yeah. Well, okay, sure. Where's the restroom?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, there's, on that, I think part of that recruiting process, a crucial part of that is that first 90 days.
Oh, yeah.
At least.
Yeah, at least, depending on how large the company is and what your position is.
Yeah. So, yeah, you have to think through that. A lot of time we short-sighted. We think about, we got to get people in the door, got to get the butt in the seat, and then we're done.
Right. I agree. The mentor is a good thing.
Mentor, yeah. Yeah, how are you gonna support that person? So
someone to go to when you have questions. Yeah.
Yep, that whole idea of mentoring, there's a lot of ways to do that too, and I think we all have had examples of good and bad mentors, or mentors that are helpful, and those that maybe weren't, or a lack of a mentor,
or lack of, yeah.
A huge difference. So, missionary, oh yeah.
There you go.
Yep. Hi, Beth.
Hi, I saw you on YouTube because I apparently did not know we had the Hangout tonight. I saw you on YouTube and you were like, it's live, and I said, oh, that means I can go watch
Yeah, I'm a YouTube sensation.
Good.
You're amazing. It's really impressive. Thank you.
We were just talking about the content this week so far.
I was listening.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, we're talking about the difference between recruiting and hiring.
Yeah, I really liked what what's your name? Cindy. What Cindy said.
Yeah, and what's that website? Difference.com?
No, let me grab it again real quick. Oh, no, differencebetween.com.
Oh, really? So you can put in like different concepts and
Yeah. Yeah, I put in what is the difference between recruiting and hiring, or hiring and recruiting. So if you want to ask for the difference between things, there's probably a lot to it. This is the first time I've popped on there was for this, and it's like, oh, okay.
No, that's good to know. All right. So how do we know well, let me back up. So how do we recruit the right people? What does it take?
So I think that really has a lot to do with the particular job you're looking for. If you get the quality of people that if you want to pay somebody $12 an hour administrative assistant job, you're going to get a $12 an hour employee. So I think knowing that people are going to be secure in their finances is a small part of it. I also think that if you're looking for a job where the leadership of that company is just looking for a lemming and somebody who will follow rules and just not think outside the box, then you're going to look for the people who qualify in that regard. But if you want somebody who is an executive, who can think outside the box, who is independent, who's not going to, you just base it off of the specific job that you're looking to fill and go from there. Right. And make sure that's clear.
Right. So you need the right criteria. You have to have your criteria set out according to what the job is and what kind of a job you want to fill and what they're going to be expected to do.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so yeah, and we can assess them in different ways. So Heather brings up the point: give them a task to evaluate their performance.
Right.
Well, and that was something that our group discussed quite a bit this week for the, that word I can't remember. But our discussion went a lot around that. If you're going to have a super Saturday, and you're only going to spend a few minutes with each individual person, or do it in a group basis, then what are you going to get? It's kind of like marrying somebody after 2 weeks of knowing them. I mean, there's going to be a lot that you're missing.
Yeah.
And by the way, I did that, so I know.
A lot of surprises down the road.
There are. We have these presumptions of what we're seeing from the few minutes that we talk to somebody. And even my second marriage, I was married for 6 years, and I had no idea, even though I'd been married the whole time, we lost so much till the end. And the same thing here, some of these employees, you may not know the quality of employee. I know he's totally missing. I don't even know if he can hear all this.
Okay.
But okay, you froze on me. But there's a lot of it you won't know until 2 weeks into the job, until they get really frustrated during training or integration process. And you don't know that a lot of the time until you get to that point.
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely, applying it to relationships, it's definitely similar. So getting to the right criteria, getting to what we need from the position. So how do we establish the criteria? How do we know what attributes we're looking for?
Well, that's when I would sit down with the people who, like the direct boss, the one that needs the employee, and say, what exactly do you need? And brainstorm with them ahead of time. Now, I've never worked for a big company. I've never had an HR department. I've always worked directly under the CEO of a small business and love it. I think business is far too complicated already. So I really enjoy these small companies. But when you sit down with that person, with the hiring manager, whoever it is who needs the position filled, and say, what exactly do you need? Okay, and they're going to list off, I need somebody who's really organized, who knows, she said, make an outline. I think that's why a direct manager should have the final say. Yeah, that's what Heather said. But sit down and say, I need somebody who knows this software. I need somebody who can learn quickly. I need somebody who isn't going to talk back,
Self-motivated.
Yeah, self-motivated. Generic. You'll get a lot of generic answers, but you also get a lot of really detailed ideas of what they actually need. And then kind of evaluate them and their team too, and maybe sit down and see how they work together.
Yeah, I like it. You definitely have to have a discussion. You can have those conversations. What if you are a little bit bigger of a company, or how do you make sure you're being consistent in the criteria that you're establishing? Are there ways that we do that?
Well, it depends on how you ask the questions, or the kind of questions you ask when you're recruiting. And if you want to ask where they can give you an example of how they've handled certain situations.
I hate those questions.
I do too, but they ask them. They really do. They ask them. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking, how are you going to handle this? How are they going to work with other people? Can they deal with these differences? And so, yeah, it's a tough one. And especially if you really haven't ever dealt with it, and never really had to, been put in that kind of a situation.
Yeah. Those are important. Those are called behavioral interview questions.
Yeah.
You know, and
I think my favorite interview was not an interview at all. You went in and you had a practice phone call. They didn't even talk to you ahead of time. They were just like, all right, we want to see how good you are at sales. We're going to do this mock phone call. And we want you to randomly pick a company out of the business, out of the phone book that's sitting there, you know, that kind of thing. And it was just, I failed miserably at it because at the time I didn't know a thing about sales.
Right.
And I obviously didn't get the job. But the point is that was the best evaluation of my skills. And there was no question about it. It was just, you know or you don't know.
Yeah, anytime you can get that kind of assessment of, you know, how they do handle situations, that's the best. And you want to formulate your questions to identify the competencies you're trying to draw out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that question I was getting at is, you know, to be consistent with that, you have to know what you're doing as a company or an organization or a group, a team, whatever you're a part of. You have to know what your core effort is or your mission. You know, and getting to the center of that by identifying the behaviors that you need in your employees.
Right.
If we don't know what we're looking for, we're going to be impressed by, you know, whatever, and then we're going to be, you know, we might make a quick or a hasty or not as great of a decision if we don't know.
If you fail to plan.
Right.
Or plan to fail.
Have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
I've only heard of that.
Okay. Dungeons and Dragons is such a fun game, and it's just it's a role-playing game. That's right. And you have a team of 5 or 6 people, and you have this dungeon master who tells you what your storyline is. But as you go throughout the storyline, they'll throw a dragon in the mix that you have to fight, or goblins or thieves, or, you know, somebody that you have to battle or to get past, you know, traps or tricks or whatever. And one of the things that a good DM will do is make sure that as everybody comes in, the characters that they choose are appropriate to the needs of the team. So you don't need a team of 5 fighters. You need a team with a healer, a magician, a fighter, a distance fighter, you know, that kind of thing. So I would say that if you can, and in choirs, I'm a choir director in my old ward and throughout the years, you know, in choirs, you need an even soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And we had this one high-level choir I had been in. He actually set it up where all of these 4 groups were integrated throughout the seating arrangement. So you was a team of a soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and then a soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and it was set up in such a way that there was an even amount of all of them, and you could direct one team, or you could direct all the sopranos, or you could direct all the tenors, or you could just take a handful of the mix and have them all work together. That's a huge part, I think, of hiring, is making sure that you're filling your needs of your team.
Yeah, great example. You know,
and when you put them together in those groupings, you have to be sure that they work well together, that they sing well in those groupings, because not everybody can match.
Some people are louder.
Yeah.
Some people, yeah.
So there's a lot of nuances.
Yes, definitely. You know, we can always try to identify if somebody's competent, but we also want to get good cultural fit too.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that part of the problem of the discussion was you want a cultural fit. I loved that. I knew it like in the back of my head, but suddenly it was in words and it made sense.
Yeah, which part, Beth?
Having the cultural fit and making sure that it wasn't just about whether or not they were qualified. It was about whether they would fit into
culturally,
yeah.
Yeah, so how do we do that? How do we assess culture fit?
Pick what you want to stress over. Pick your battles.
Well, you know, when you have, I missed what Heather said. That's okay,
She
Heather.
said,
I think she's asking a similar question, right, Heather?
Yeah.
Just from an interview, do you have an example of real life experience?
There we go.
Yeah. What do you guys think about that? No, that's a good question. So you were all stunned.
I don't think you can from an interview. I mean, I guess you could, but not in a rush Super Saturday.
No, well, it depends on the kind of questions. So they will also ask you questions about what you do in your off time. I've been in those. I've had those things asked. And
no, but the dilemma it seems like the dilemma you'd run into is possible discriminatory behaviors. Oh, she's Mormon. She won't go out and drinking with the guys at the end of the day, you know, and having to be really, really cautious about that.
Yeah, they have to be careful, but they will ask, you know, what are your interests? You know, what hobbies do you have? Because sometimes your hobbies and the things that you do, they instill in you skills that you can utilize in positions. So they will look at that too.
I often use the reference to being a choir director in my job interviews because it's an amazing leadership requirement. It changes. I mean, the ability to take a group of semi-level talented volunteers and turning them into somebody who can sound amazing.
Right.
That's kind of a big deal, in my opinion. She said, we thought about asking how they give back to their community. That's an interesting cultural question. I actually like that.
Yeah, that's a good example. So this comes into play, and it's almost, you can almost draw upon this kind of, I'm lacking the word. You have to kind of listen with your good sense, if that makes sense. So I'm thinking of the many times, you know, we'll be hiring for a manager or a frontline supervisor position. You know, you might have, and this is the good problem, the problem you want to have is you want to have maybe 2 or 3 that are just really close as far as top candidates who we're going to choose. But what usually happens is we either have another round of interviews or do some sort of assessment or assignment or exercise, or we come down to it and ask that question, what do we really need out of this position and who would fit that?
Mm-hmm.
Discernment. I think you're looking for the word discernment.
Yeah, there's some discernment that you can draw from their responses and how they handled it. So, you know, I'm thinking of an example. We had Jared, who was interviewed many times for this supervisor position. All of his answers are great about past experiences with, you know, in retail, in quality, and different things that, you know, fit right into what we were asking. But we knew in this particular position, we knew we needed some of those soft skills. You know, so we usually ask a question of, hey, how do you handle conflict, you know, with the supervisor, or how have you given difficult feedback to a fellow employer, somebody that you oversaw?
Right.
You can draw a lot from those things. So it really does go back to the asking the right questions, and then asking that question again at the end. Okay, it's all kind of laid out on the table. We've got some notes here. We've got some scoring that we're doing as a panel. Let's collaborate, find out what we really need for this position. Again, kind of review that, and then you can come to a conclusion. And if you're stuck,
Heather asks, is there a golden answer?
Haha. If there is, let me know. If you find it, let me know. The silver bullet.
The answer, I have the answer to that. Are you ready? It's being the one person who fits into that job. And then for the rest of us to accept that we just weren't.
Yeah.
to not take offense and to know that they were feeling what they needed to. It's kind of like auditioning for a play. I have 10 girls who would play a great Annie, but I only need one.
Right.
Don't take offense. Just accept a different job or go find another play to be in. You know, just
So
I can't hire all of you.
What about for the hiring manager? Is there a golden answer for the hiring manager? How do we do it? How do we pick the right person every time?
There's, if you have to do it every time, that means you didn't pick the right person the first time. How many people do you have to hire for the same job, people?
Well, that could be an indicator too. You know, if it's like, hey, we're flying through supervisors every 2 or 3 months. What's going on? Maybe we need to look at our process.
Yeah.
Or the management who's hiring.
Right. Maybe our whole process. So I've dealt with that, and you know, my current role, I came on board, and my predecessor, she was so focused on, you know, they did a panel interview, and they scored the questions, and the score was the law.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
I got there and I'm like, huh? What? And they're like, can I ask these people why they want this position? I'm like, of course you can ask that question. You should ask that question. And yes, but we need to collaborate and look for any red flags. We need to make sure that we're, you know, covering everything there. So
right.
Looking at your process is important. Maybe looking at who's on the panels. Everything like that. So, is there a golden answer? I think the biggest thing is knowing what you're looking for.
Right.
And then asking the right things. Here's a good question there. What can you not ask? What can we not ask in an interview?
Religion, gender, anything that can be misconstrued as discrimination, pretty much. Disability. I guess to some degree, hi kitty kitty. To some degree, disability is kind of a necessity to know. If I am on the phone all the time, but I'm deaf in one ear, that could potentially hinder my ability to do the job.
Yeah. So protected classes. So anything to do with
gender, race.
Gender.
Religion.
Pregnancy is a big one that comes up.
Oh yeah.
I felt bad for my boss. He hired me, and I got pregnant like 2 months later. It's like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you know, and we run into that a lot. We've got hourly employees that we hire for, and you know, a young lady comes in 6 months pregnant. Can we use that as a factor? No. It's a non-factor. So, you know, in our mind.
How do you prove that that's why they didn't hire you?
You know, that's kind of a different ball of wax. But I mean, if you didn't get hired and you make known if they especially if they're asking you those type of questions, that's where companies can get in big trouble. And
does body language come into play? So, like, let's say they don't necessarily ask you, but they keep looking at your belly. And then they stuff like that.
It could. I think, you know, and if it's a position where it's like, hey, we're trying to ramp, we need help for the next 3 or 4 months. And, you know, they're asking questions. You know, when do you do? When are you expecting? Stuff like that. How many kids do you have? You know, stuff like that. That's.
I'm screwed.
So those are illegal questions. So if you get asked a question like that, that's illegal.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good to know.
And so just make it a non-factor. And so at work right now,
another question.
We're training 120 employees in a new project. And,
oh wow.
We lost one line of business and we flipped them into a new line of business. So of course, you know, we had a few gals that are pregnant or, you know, due down the road or due in 2 weeks. So what was the tendency? Well, there was a thought out there, and we had to step in and correct this. Of, well, there's going to be a second wave of training in November. Why don't we just, they'll be on leave. Let's put them into that second class because so-and-so is going to have a baby in a month, right? And the training's 6 weeks.
Right.
So
Yeah.
how do we handle that?
Hmm.
What about
The pregnancy is a non-factor. So,
they have to retain their employment regardless.
we can't force them onto a leave. We put them in training and they go on pregnancy leave and come back when they're done.
So what about situations where, let's say you go into a company to do an interview and you get the impression that your weight is a factor in their decision, the way you look, whether or not you have, any number of things, but how does that play into the discrimination laws?
Talking about how you feel, or more of what kind of questions were asked, what was said?
So, like, let's say they ended up asking you questions that led you to, that were questions regarding your, no, I wouldn't want to work for a company like that. But for example, a great example, if you want to be a stewardess or a flight attendant, obviously you have to be a certain size for a position of that nature. What gives them the legal right to establish that as a company?
So you can have job requirements, that are a fit for the duties of the job. Guidelines, ability to do this. So, I don't think they can put a specific weight or specific size requirements, or maybe they could. That's something we can research, because the walkways are this size and that. So you've got to be able to match up to that. But the way to the mindset that you want to be in as a company is, you have the job requirements. The biggest thing you're doing in an interview is, okay, can this person fulfill the requirements of a job? And
well, then wouldn't that answer your original question about how do you determine what to ask?
There you go. Yeah, it comes back around to that. So can they fulfill the requirements of the job? And then on the culture side, what do we need? What attributes do we need in this position? Kind of those two mindsets for competency and culture can really help.
It seems to me like culture would be a really fine line with discrimination.
It can be, but what you're doing, so you got to be very deliberate in what you do. So you don't ask questions that are illegal, so you don't put off those perceptions. And then the reason you disqualify someone for an interview has to be something connected to the job requirements, not enough experience, need more training, whatever it might be. It can't be because, oh, we don't like the way you look, or you're pregnant. Right. We just don't, we don't like how old you are. All those illegal areas, those are protected. So if you're in that mindset, you're gonna be okay.
Yeah. So
probably the most extreme example, and I think this was 10, 15 years ago. There was actually a man who threw a lawsuit against Hooters because he applied for a job and they didn't hire him. Okay, so we can fill that in. We know how that looks. Anyway, and I'm not trying to be inappropriate, but yeah, it went to a lawsuit, and based on gender, Hooters wasn't winning the case. They ended up winning it because they have, because really what they do is sex related, and so there's some job requirements there. That's how they spun it.
Yeah.
Because of his gender, it went to legal action. So I know that's an awkward.
Well, that's like the first reverse side of that I've seen. That.
So yeah.
That's awesome.
Right. So I don't support that company, but I've always kept that example in mind because, yeah, like legally, hey, if I apply for a job at this place and I'm able to do the job, I might have a case.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be applying for a job there, but something to keep.
Right.
Things we never knew, huh?
Yeah. So sorry to use that example, but that's always kind of struck me of how important it is to be mindful of how we're presenting ourselves and how we're setting up our job requirements.
Yeah.
So we can attract the right people and avoid lawsuits. You always have people that are looking for lawsuits. So
oh yeah.
As Heather said there, so you're right. So it's a interesting time. I actually have, this is my first one, so I actually have it's not an EEOC complaint, but we had a gentleman that filed a complaint with the state Human Rights Commission. So we let him go, and he's made some claims about discrimination. And
I missed what you said. You phased out. What did you say happened?
No, I was just saying just this week I have an employee that we let go that put in a grievance with the Idaho. So it's not at the level of the EEOC, but it certainly could go that way. We'll be fine. We did not fire him because of his age or his disability or any discrimination. He's just throwing those complaints out there, and I have to answer to them. And it makes it. We have to provide all the documentation. We have to look at who else we didn't fire or did fire because of those same reasons. Look at the ages, genders, all that fun stuff. So you have to be careful. Decisions of who you bring on and how you let them go.
So my husband's job is a union job, and his company does something kind of tricky. If they need to let somebody go, they put them basically on an eternal suspension. They don't just fire them because then they can get they can fight it out with the union. But they'll do, we're going to suspend you pending investigation, and then they just don't do the investigation at all.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. So we'll actually have a section around corrective action and termination here coming up.
Okay.
So yeah, there's different ways that's handled, and then we'll talk about unions a little bit too.
Yeah.
So what it comes down to, what we're addressing is there's a lot of protected areas for us, which is great. It's a good thing. It's good to be a worker in America.
Well, it's so.
I've had peers that worked overseas, and they don't have the employment laws that we do, and
yeah, we have a number of really strange situations between the union and the company. It's just a weird.
The unions have their pros and cons, and so think about that. I think that's coming up in a week or two. So we'll.
Cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, and so thinking about talent, it comes down to getting the right. In that intro video, talked about good to great a little bit. Getting the right people on the bus. I've also taken that further, getting the right people in the right seat.
Yeah.
And you've got the right people in mind. You've got the right people that you're attracting and retaining in your company. Your customers will thrive. Your organization will thrive. So we'll talk about that. And I mentioned it in my intro a little bit, but I also like to think about the Lord's talent philosophy. Kind of how he looks at that. You think about our church membership. You think about who he calls to positions. You think about the quorum of the 12. Think about President Monson. What does the Lord look for?
Someone that's willing to do the work.
because he qualifies the called. He doesn't call the qualified. He likes humility and he likes meekness, but he also seeks confidence. You know, we're not supposed to be martyrs. We're not supposed to be, if life guides us that way, but he doesn't want somebody who's in a pity party all the time because they can't figure out where they belong and the confidence level with humility. And, you know, he wants us to be willing to push forward the progress of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the time we're so busy tearing ourselves down because we think we're being humble that we're just in a martyrdom cycle and we can't get past that, so we never progress.
Right. And I love Elder Maxwell's statement, if we show the Lord our availability, he'll improve our capability.
Oh, that's cool.
So our Father in heaven has his talent philosophy, his core competency down to one thing. That's the willing heart. And it's section 64. The Lord requireth a heart and a willing mind, and the willing and obedient shall eat the good of the land of Zion in these last days. So the heart and the willing mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, from a gospel perspective, we're all trying to be disciples each day. We're trying to improve. We're trying to figure. All we have to do is be willing. And I think that's a wonderful gift because he doesn't ask for any more than that. He does ask us to be perfect, right? We heard about that in conference, but it's perfect eventually. Borrowing from Elder Holland, we can be perfect eventually. Right now, we just need to be willing.
Yeah, that's what we need to be striving for. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, that goes a long ways of how, you know, what our personal reminder there to not fall into that martyrdom type thinking, the victim mentality, to really be kind to ourselves too. Have willingness to grow and learn from our mistakes and get better.
Yeah.
I've always, you know, when we talk about this, I think of that scripture of the Lord's talent philosophy, and, you know, whatever position we're in at work or in a business we're running or two, we're going to have people challenges. Looking for the people that can work through difficulty and solve problems and be willing to accept feedback. It's huge. That's a huge one, by the way, and often something I ask people about is, you know, can you receive feedback and can you give feedback?
Right.
If you can't receive feedback, you're not gonna progress.
You're gonna have a really hard time.
Yeah, and sometimes feedback really hurts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, ouch! But it usually hurts because it's right, and we need to adjust. So.
Yeah, I think that sometimes I really liked at the end of I don't even think I'm not sure. E-Myth Revisited. That's not this class, is it? Okay, so I have to read that for one of my other classes. I'm in 6 classes. It's ridiculous. One of my classes, we're reading this book, and I'm pretty sure it was this one, but it was talking about the difference between, oh my gosh, what was it? I was trying to remember. I don't remember what it was, but that confidence thing, we just need to. Yeah, sorry, my brain kind of went off in its own little world.
No, you're fine. If you think of it, send an email. Send us a note.
I will. Now I have to go listen to that part of the book again.
Yeah. Cool. Any other thoughts? Something you've learned, kind of put together this week?
I've enjoyed this class. I actually have enjoyed it so much that I'm looking for. I've been doing admin for years, but this course has kind of brought me to this really neat place. You're staying here. of actually wanting to pursue a field in HR. I just think it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a great field. Really, the goal of HR, and we'll find this in every lesson. Really, HR is there to be a partner. You're kind of watching. You're putting on your legal hat, make sure you're compliant. You're also there to be a consultant for talent and needs and how to get there and how to do that fairly and create the right perceptions. When it comes to selecting talent, how often do we feel like someone got promoted just because they're buddies with the boss? Yeah. Versus, hey, we know there's a process here, but there's some preparation involved that they worked hard and were the selection for the position. That's what we really want to create, ideally. Doing HR. So I know you've got plenty to read. There's an article I'll share about HR. There's some there's kind of some misperceptions out there about HR. I just got into HR because I love people and it's great. That's important, but sometimes HR you have to be the tough guy or the bad guy too.
Yeah.
For me, it's about problem solving. I love to solve problems. I don't care if it means that somebody needs to be let go. If it's best for the company, that's a shame. But to me, I love solving problems. And to me, HR is just kind of the ultimate. How do I make sure the company and the employees are all satisfied? And who has to be moved here or taken away from there to make that happen?
You're right. You're right. So our senior site director, he'll solving problems, Travis. Do my best because he knows that HR is there to kind of help solve the problems that operations or whoever can't figure out on their own. So sure, every day something new. Sometimes they're the littlest problems in the world and they become the biggest thing. Well, that's okay. All right. Well, thanks for your comments and conversation. I hope it is helpful just to kind of just have those type of discussions and your insight. I appreciate it and I appreciate your participation on that. But yeah, I think my takeaway for you is to think about your talent philosophy for yourself. What's your, if you have a mission statement or a value statement for yourself, that's good. But what's your development philosophy for yourself? Because sometimes we kind of get down on ourselves. We kind of get discouraged. But how can we set up our plans so that we're growing, but we're doing so in a healthy way?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I like it.
Cool. Okay. You bet. Well, thanks, Heather. Glad you joined us, even though I couldn't hear you. And thank you, Cindy, and thanks, Beth.
Thanks.
Everybody else that's going to watch the recording.
Yeah. Have a good week.
All right. Take care. Have a good
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.